distance because they could come in a hurry, as you were mentioning earlier.
8 points.
Sometimes that courtside can get you. It's tricky.
The phone screen glowed in the soft darkness of Caitlin Clark's Phoenix hotel room, the faint hum of the air conditioner mingling with the muted sounds of the city outside. As she stared at the message that would quietly alter everything she thought she understood about her basketball journey. It was one of those still, breathless moments where the world narrows down to a few glowing words on a small screen. Yet somehow those words carry the weight of a lifetime. How does one process a message from their childhood idol? The player whose highlights you studied like scripture, whose every crossover and fadeaway became part of your muscle memory. When that message reveals not just admiration, but a secret thread of connection that's been there all along, invisible yet powerful. This wasn't merely about basketball, fame, or professional respect. It was about legacy, the unseen hand that guides one generation of greatness towards the next, the subtle inheritance of belief that passes from one soul to another through the shared language of passion and persistence. Caitlin had always believed that hard work was her only compass, that her rise from driveway dreams in Iowa to professional stardom was built purely on grit and obsession. But what she was about to learn that night would show her that sometimes destiny isn't a lonely pursuit. Sometimes, someone has been silently walking beside you all along. The message arrived at 11:47 p.m., when the adrenaline from another record-breaking performance still pulsed through her body like an unspoken rhythm. The soft blue glow of her phone painted her face with quiet light as she scrolled through the usual wave of messages. Congratulatory texts, sponsor emails, interview requests. All the trappings of fame that had become both familiar and exhausting. Then she saw the name, Kevin Durant. For a second, she thought it had to be a mistake, maybe. A fan account or a misdirected message. But as she opened it, her breath caught and her heart seemed to pause mid-beat. Durant, the player whose poster had hung above her bed since she was 10, the one whose interview she had watched for guidance before big games, the one who represented everything pure and poetic about the sport, had written to her personally. Caitlin, the message began, and she could almost hear his calm, deliberate tone. The same voice that had once spoken about perseverance, about loving the process more than the praise. I've been watching your journey, it read, and there's something I need you to know. Something I should have told you years ago, when I first saw you play at that AU tournament in Chicago. Her mind reeled back instantly to that weekend. The AU Nationals, her junior year of high school, when the world had seemed both impossibly big and terrifyingly small. She remembered the smell of the polished gym floor, the squeak of sneakers, the pressure so intense it had felt like every dribble carried her entire future. You probably don't remember, the message continued, but I was there that weekend, sitting in the stands, watching the future of basketball unfold in front of me. I saw you take control of that championship game. I saw you make plays that reminded me why I fell in love with this sport in the first place. The words seemed to echo in her chest. She remembered the fear that had gripped her before tip-off, the silent prayer she'd whispered to herself not to mess up, the moment she looked up after a fast break three-pointer and caught sight of a tall man in a hoodie sitting near the corner of the bleachers, clapping once quietly. Could that have been him? Durant went on, but here's what you didn't know. After that game, I called my agent and told him to remember your name. I said, that girl's going to change basketball. Not women's basketball. Basketball, period. Caitlin felt her throat tighten as tears welled in he. Scorers in the history of the sport had seen something in her, a 17-year-old girl from West Des Moines, before the rest of the world did. While she had been second-guessing every pass, worrying about impressing scouts, he had recognized something raw and extraordinary in her game. The same unrelenting will, the same quiet fire that separated the great from the merely good. She set her phone down for a moment, her vision blurring as emotion surged through her. For all her accolades, all her broken records, there had always been a part of her that wondered if she truly belonged in the pantheon of greatness. And now, here was Durant's voice bridging that doubt with belief. When she finally picked up the phone again, the message had grown even more personal. You want to know why I've never reached out before now? He wrote. Because I didn't want to add to the pressure you were already carrying. I didn't want you to think you had to live up to something I expected. I wanted you to become exactly who you were meant to be, without anyone else's shadow. His words carried a tenderness that felt almost paternal, but also deeply human, the kind of understanding that only someone who has lived under the blinding light of expectation could express. Caitlin sat there for a long moment, her phone still in her hands, the weight of the message settling over her like a revelation. She thought about the nights she'd practiced until her legs gave out, the games where she'd carried her team through sheer willpower, the loneliness that sometimes came with greatness. And now she realized she hadn't been as alone as she thought. Someone who understood the cost of ambition had been silently cheering her on, believing in her without ever demanding anything in return. Durant's message wasn't just a compliment. It was a torch passed between generations, a recognition of spirit that transcended gender, era, and circumstance. It reminded her that greatness isn't inherited by fame.
See, they didn't pick her up outside. They let her drive too deep. And
what did we say, F1 earlier? Like a McLaren. Whitcomb and a step back.
The thoughtfulness behind Kevin Durant's silence struck Caitlin Clark more deeply than any public praise could have. In an age when attention is currency and mentorship is often performed under the glow of cameras, Durant had chosen instead the quiet dignity of watching from the shadows, letting her carve her own path without the burden of his endorsement. But watching you this season, his message read, seeing how you've handled the pressure, the criticism, the impossible standards everyone's placed on your shoulders, I realize you don't need protection anymore. You've become everything I saw in that 17-year-old girl in Chicago, and so much more. Tears rolled freely down Caitlin's cheeks as she absorbed his words, feeling an immense wave of validation she hadn't even known she was yearning for. For years, she'd borne the immense weight of expectation, being labeled the future of women's basketball, carrying the hopes of young girls who saw themselves in her boldness, and facing the criticism that often accompanies those who dare to redefine what is possible. Durant's next words seemed to cut through years of that isolation. Every time someone has criticized your game, said you're too flashy or too confident or too different, I've wanted to tell them they're watching greatness in real time. They're just too blind to see it. His empathy was unmistakable. Here was a man who had endured his own share of public scrutiny and misunderstanding, now offering her the rare comfort of being truly seen. For Caitlin, it felt like someone had reached into her private fears and answered them with understanding. But more than that, the message continued. I need you to know that you've inspired me. Watching you play with such joy, such fearlessness, such pure love for the game. It's reminded me why I started playing basketball in the first place. You've made me a better player, and you probably don't even realize it. The words felt surreal. She, a 23-year-old still learning to balance stardom and selfhood, had inspired Kevin Durant, one of the most celebrated players of his generation. The symmetry of it all, the girl who had once studied his footwork, now awakening in him the joy that had once defined his early years, felt almost poetic. Durant's tone turned reflective. I've been in this league a long time, Caitlin. I've seen players come and go. But what you have, it's something deeper. It's not just skill or IQ. It's that rare gift of making others believe impossible things are possible. She could imagine him typing in his own hotel room after a late-night game, carefully choosing every word, understanding how powerful they would be. His next message carried the weight of a benediction. Don't ever let anyone dim your light. Don't let them convince you to play smaller or quieter or more conventionally. The game needs your fire, even if they don't understand it yet. As she read those words, the tears came again. Not from sadness, but from the fierce relief of being understood. Durant ended simply, you're not just playing for yourself or your fans. You're playing for every kid who's ever been told they're too different, too ambitious, too much. You're showing them that different isn't only okay. It's necessary. Proud of you, KD. Caitlin sat for a long time in silence, her phone glowing softly in her hands, realizing that this was no ordinary message. It was a passing of the torch, a quiet acknowledgement between two souls who understood the loneliness of greatness. She thought back to that teenage girl at the AU tournament, nervous and hungry, unaware that her hero had been sitting in the stands already, recognizing the spark that would one day ignite the sport. The connection between them now felt almost divine, a thread woven by time and faith, by shared passion and unspoken understanding. As she finally drifted into sleep that night, Caitlin felt changed. She carried not just Durant's words, but the deep truth behind them. That greatness recognizes greatness long before the world does. That inspiration moves in circles rather than lines. And that sometimes the most powerful mentorship is silent, unseen, yet profoundly felt. It reminded her that she was part of something larger. A living legacy stretching across generations, built on courage, on love for the game, and on the rare grace of those who dare to believe in others before they believe in themselves.